No one ever asked if I wanted to be collateral in someone else's contract. One night a mark lit up in my chest, and a man in a perfect suit stepped out of the espresso machine. Technically, he stepped out of the reflection on the steel panel, but tell that to my adrenal glands. The co-working space was doing its late evening impression of an abandoned aquarium, flickering, strip lights, blue glow from monitors, a low electrical hum under the smell of burned coffee. I was the last idiot still at a desk, massaging my wrists after rebuilding a user flow my ex insisted was innovative, and the market later called confusing. The machine hissed. The reflection moved. The glass surface peeled open like a curtain of black water, and he walked through. Perfectly dry, perfectly pressed, and completely wrong for Brooklyn after 10 p.m. "Good evening," he said, as if he'd merely opened a door I hadn't noticed. His voice was clean, the kind that made people sit up straighter just to match it. He glanced at my t-shirt that read "Fragile, handle with coffee," and almost smiled. Noah Hahn? The name felt too heavy in his mouth. My chest pulsed, heat first, then a cold ring around it, like a chilled hand closing over my sternum. I made a sound that I'll generously call a laugh. Yeah, I said, and pressed my palm to my shirt. Something underneath my skin throbbed like a trapped ember. Did Julian send you? Because if this is another pivot, I'm out of synonyms. Julian Cole, he said, clinical. Yes, he signed a formal contract earlier this evening. He tapped his cufflink, matte black, understated, probably cost more than my entire laptop setup. And he named you. The heat licked up my throat. Named me for what? As anchor. He lifted his gaze to mine. Eyes the color of smoked glass. Collateral, in your vernacular. I stared at him, until the espresso machine beeped, as if to punctuate the silence. Anchor. The word sank in my stomach, and dragged everything else down with it. This is a joke, I said, bright as tin. I don't do role play in offices. Not since HR made a slide deck. A tiny line appeared between his brows. I don't joke at the outset of legal obligations. Then, softer, somewhere close to kind, your chest will continue to burn. You might describe the sensation as hot ink. It's temporary. Right on cue, the ink flared. I hissed, and pulled the collar of my shirt down. A thin sigil had risen beneath my skin, luminous as if drawn with cold fire. A neat circle with a small notch at the bottom, like a keyhole. It pulsed in time with my heart. I swallowed. Okay. That's either the world's worst tattoo, or I fell asleep on a stove coil. It's a mark, he said. Your ex signed under specific terms. He acquired advantage. A ghost of distaste on the word. He needed stability for the execution. He spoke your name into the contract's memory. I thought of Julian's mouth. How he could make anything sound like a favor. It's just this once, Noah. You're the only one I trust to check my blind spots. Like a seatbelt he never intended to wear. I took a step back from the espresso machine and my own reflection in it. Let me get this straight, I said carefully. Julian made a deal, and instead of collateral like, I don't know, his dignity, he used me? Collateral must be something he possesses, the man said, then tilted his head. He thinks he does. Or did. Anger snapped like static up my arms, quick and bright. Well, he doesn't. Which is why this is complicated. He glanced around at the neon-lit empty chairs and succulents in geometric pots. This is not an ideal venue. May we relocate? And go where, exactly? I gestured at the rippling steel panel. Back through your Narnia dishwasher? He ignored that. You're overheating. The mark amplifies until it's stabilized by the principle. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, and produced a slim black folder that shouldn't have fit in there. He laid it on the counter next to a stack of sugar packets and turned it toward me. The paper didn't look like paper. It had the grain of something older, like vellum, but it smelled faintly of ozone. On the top page, clean serif letters spelled my name. Under it, anchor, provisional. Under that, a tangle of clauses that made my brain buzz like the old fluorescent tubes in the kitchen at my grandma's house. I was, tragically, good with contracts. Years with Julian had taught me to read the fine print, and the microscopic print beneath the fine. Provisional? I said. 7 days, he said. A temporary agreement to stabilize your mark while we evaluate compatibility. Withdrawal is permitted if certain thresholds are met. Consent must be explicit. A small pause. I prefer explicit consent. I blinked at him. Heat crawled along my collarbone. Under it, the burning cooled to a manageable throb, as if the paperwork itself had soothed it. My voice came out and tripped over itself. Who are you? He offered me the kind of nod usually reserved for settlements. Silas Cade. Enforcement and compliance. Enforcement, I repeated. Like a collections agent. More like a fiduciary, he said. With teeth. My laugh startled itself out of me. I love that for you. He didn't smile exactly, but whatever his face did made the lights seem less cruel. Mr. Han, he said, anchor selection is at my discretion. The name offered gives me the right to approach you. It does not bind you without your consent. If you decline, the mark will continue to escalate, until it ruptures. If you accept the temporary agreement, I will carry the excess load, and you will not die in a company. Working space, which, if I understand your species' preferences, is considered embarrassing. Wow, I said. You really know how to sell a plan. He folded his hands on top of the folder. They were not human hands in the sense that they were too still, but the knuckles were perfectly normal, with the faintest dusting of skin, no talons, no smoke. Human hands could be dangerous too. I knew that already. Why me? I asked, quieter than I intended. The question tasted like old coffee and older fear. Julian could have picked anybody. People do not pick anybody when they are frightened, Silas said, and his tone shifted. A darker note under the consonants, like a string pulled tauter. He chose the one he thought would hold. I looked down at the mark, at the keyhole that breathed with me. The room felt suddenly too small, full of things that had once been mine. The ergonomic chair. The mug I'd stolen from a conference 2 years ago, the stupid cactus I kept overwatering. None of them were part of me the way Julian had once made himself, or the way this mark now tried to be. I don't serve him, I said. Silas's eyes stayed on mine. No. Heat built again. A tightening band squeezing my ribs inward, making my vision prickle. Okay, fine, I managed. Let's say I sign your temporary whatever. What's the catch? You will accompany me while I execute clauses, he said, as if inviting me to the grocery store. You will observe. You will not perform duties that contravene your will. You will eat. You will sleep. You will tell me when the mark spikes. That's unusually considerate. It is efficient. A pause, then a precise addition, and considerate. I flipped the folder open. The clauses were elegant, even beautiful, in the way structure can be when it fits perfectly around something chaotic. There were thresholds and safe words. Well, not coded as safe words, but the effect was similar. I would never tell Silas this, but it was better than any contract Julian had ever offered me. Where do I sign? I asked. Silas set a pen down. It was heavy, warm, as if it had been sitting in sunlight. At the line. I hesitated. Then I thought of Julian saying, I'm protecting you, Noah, while using my work and my hours and my patience as currency. I thought of dying on cheap carpet under a fluorescent snake. I thought of the way Silas hadn't touched me once, despite clearly wanting to. No, not wanting. Needing to stabilize the mark. And choosing instead to explain. Wait, I said, and looked up. One condition. Silas's eyebrows ticked up a millimeter. Name it. You don't touch me unless I say it's okay, I said. My voice didn't shake. Even if it would be faster or neater or whatever your efficiency metrics are. Something subtle uncoiled between his shoulders. Relief? Agreed, he said. And reciprocal. You will not touch me unless you say it is okay. I blinked. Deal? The pen made a soft scratch. The paper drank my name. The mark in my chest pulsed once, twice, then cooled to a quiet ember, as if a storm had moved offshore. Silas watched the ink sink. It suits you, he said. What, the keyhole? Kind of on the nose? The form, he said, ignoring the joke. The way you write yourself, where you can't be edited without consent. I closed the folder and slid it back across the counter. So, I said, aiming for breezy and landing somewhere near foolish bravery. Do we leave through the coffee machine, or do you book an Uber? He allowed himself a pale smile. We'll take the door like civilized creatures. He glanced toward the glass exit. The reflection stuttered once in the pane, catching his silhouette, then stilled. Mr. Han, Noah. The first hours are the most volatile. If it escalates, tell me, and I will carry it. I thought of weight shared, of a hand extended. You're very confident for someone who just crawled out of an appliance, I said, grabbing my hoodie and backpack. I am not crawling, he said, almost offended. I snorted and reached for the lights. Fine, striding. Let's stride. As we stepped into the hallway, the motion sensor flicked on the last row of LEDs. My reflection followed us in the glass, the mark of faint glow over my heart. It didn't feel like a brand anymore. It felt like a warning. Or maybe a promise. I hadn't decided which. Silas? I said, as the night air reached us. A cold slice of November, and wet concrete. Yes, Noah. If Julian asks, I said, and the words were sour and satisfying both. Tell him I didn't sign this for him. I wouldn't, Silas said. Then, carefully, as if choosing to practice a new language, you signed this for yourself. The mark warmed under my ribs. I pretended it was the wind and followed the demon into the city. The world didn't end when I signed the folder. It just shifted sideways. One moment I was standing in the lobby of a Brooklyn co-working space that smelled like reheated ramen and ambition. The next I was stepping out of a doorway that wasn't a doorway into what looked like the lobby of a law firm, designed by someone with a mirror fetish. The walls shimmered with glass panels that didn't quite reflect you back correctly. Every surface doubled and tripled, until the space felt infinite, the air filled with faint whispers that might have been ventilation, or might have been echoes of other people's names. Silas walked like he owned the floor, which apparently he did. His shoes clicked with impossible precision. No squeak, no scuff. Mine squeaked immediately. Of course they did. Welcome to the Bureau of Contractual Compliance, he said, the words flat as if rehearsed in 100 languages. Here, transactions are documented, stored, and enforced. You will be granted provisional access. Love what you've done with the place, I muttered. Is there a mirror dimension Home Goods, or do you source everything directly from Hell's IKEA? Silas ignored me, which I was starting to realize was his version of a smile. He guided me down a corridor, where the walls breathed faint light. Names flickered across them, thousands of names, written in languages I half recognized, and some that looked like tangled circuitry. Every so often, one glowed brighter before fading again. Active clauses, Silas explained. Each flare indicates a contract executing. So, like push notifications, I said. He gave me a sidelong look. Less trivial, more binding. Yeah, that's what Slack says too. We reached a tall double door with frosted panes. He pushed it open and gestured me inside. The office was startlingly normal. Shelves, a desk, a potted plant that might have been alive, and behind it all, a woman in a sharply cut charcoal suit. Her hair was silver, pulled back into a severe bun, and her glasses reflected more light than should exist. She looked up and smiled thinly, like she'd been waiting to correct me since birth. Mr. Han, she said crisp. I am Miss Peregrine, Compliance Counsel. You're the provisional anchor. I raised a hand in a weak half wave. Provisional sucker, at your service. Her smile didn't change, but I felt judged on 17 levels. Mr. Cade, the paperwork? Silas set the black folder on her desk. She opened it, skimmed it faster than human eyes should, and nodded once. 7 days provisional service. Anchor to Silas Cade, Demon of Enforcement. Termination permitted if clauses 3 or 5 are breached. Explicit consent confirmed. The way she said it made it sound like she was narrating my tombstone. Do you always read contracts like it's slam poetry? I asked. Precision is poetry, she replied, without looking at me. Then she adjusted her glasses, and finally pinned me with a gaze so sharp it nicked the back of my throat. Anchors burn out quickly without regulation. Your survival depends on accuracy. Any deviation is inefficient. Great pep talk, I said. Feeling super reassured. Do not worry, she said deadpan. If you expire, your mark will be recycled into another host. I choked. That's supposed to help? Her lips curved a fraction. Clarity always helps. Silas cleared his throat. We'll continue with orientation. I shot him a look as we left. You keep good company. She is the most effective in her department, he said. Her survival rate for anchors is the highest. Do I want to know what the average is? No. We stepped back into the corridor. This time he led me past a row of shelves, stacked with books that looked like they'd been bound in everything from parchment to plastic. Some glowed faintly. Some shivered as we passed. Archives, Silas said. Every contract ever recorded. I slowed, scanning the spines. My chest tightened when I caught flickers of English names. Abigail Wong, Marco Flores, Julian Cole. That one glowed faintly red, pulsing like a guilty heartbeat. I pressed my palm against the mark in my chest. It pulsed in rhythm, answering. My mouth went dry. Silas stopped, turning just enough to see me. It recognizes him, he said. That is expected. Yeah. Expected like a migraine. You'll acclimate. Do you people have onboarding seminars? Yes, he said seriously. Most anchors don't survive them. I stopped in my tracks. You're joking. He didn't stop walking. I told you, not at the outset of legal obligations. We reached a wide atrium where clerks in dark suits drifted between floating desks. Each desk was a slab of glass lit from within, projecting text into the air. They carried pens that left trails of light when they wrote, and I swear some of them had more arms than they should. None of them looked surprised to see me. This is Casual Friday? I whispered. Clerks, Silas said. They draft the contracts. You won't interact with them directly. One of the clerks glanced at me with eyes that split into vertical script before returning to normal. I quickly looked away. Yeah, I'm good with that, I muttered. We finally stopped in front of another mirror panel door. Silas opened it to reveal a smaller office, mercifully less terrifying, with 2 chairs facing a desk. He gestured for me to sit. The folder appeared again, neat and waiting. Silas sat across from me and opened it, his voice flattening into recital. Clause 1. The anchor agrees to accompany the principal on contractual executions for 7 days. Clause 2. The anchor agrees to report physical sensations linked to the mark. Clause 3. Hold up. I raised a hand. Report sensations? What if I just say ow and call it a day? That would be insufficient data. Okay, doctor, I muttered. Go on. Clause 3. The principal agrees not to compel the anchor against his will. Clause 4. The anchor will not suffer penalties for non-compliance except in cases of deliberate sabotage. Clause 5. Wait, I said again. So if I refuse to fetch you coffee, I don't get zapped? Silas regarded me calmly. I make my own coffee. I blinked. You're the first entity in this place who doesn't terrify me. His mouth twitched like he almost disagreed. He finished the recital, each word a weight, then slid the pen toward me again. The mark in my chest throbbed, urging me like an impatient metronome. I leaned back. So 7 days as your intern, basically. Assistant, Silas corrected. Sure, I said. Do I get dental? He ignored me until the silence grew painful. Finally, with a sigh that might have been amusement, he said, Sign, Noah. I did. The ink shimmered, the mark cooled, and the bureau's air seemed to exhale around us. For the first time since Julian's betrayal, I realized my life wasn't just my own anymore. It belonged, at least for 7 days, to a system bigger and stranger than I'd ever imagined. One that apparently kept its records in mirrors and measured survival in clauses. And somehow, against every shred of common sense, I'd agreed to be part of it. The first thing Silas said when we emerged onto a rainy street in Queens was, You will observe, And you will not interfere. Which was hilarious, because nothing about standing outside a stranger's apartment building with a demon at midnight screamed observer, more like co-conspirator in a very niche crime drama. We climbed 4 flights of creaking stairs, and Silas knocked. His knock wasn't loud, but it carried. Like the wood recognized authority and echoed it inward. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 70s, her hair pulled back with a practical clip, her sweater worn soft at the elbows. She studied Silas for half a second, then stepped aside without a word, as if she'd been expecting him all evening. "This is Mina Cho," Silas said, formal, as he crossed the threshold. "Our client." "Client," I muttered. "Cool. Totally normal word for what this is." Mina's apartment smelled faintly of ginger and mothballs. The furniture was neat, the cushions plump from careful tending. Framed photos lined a shelf, a boy in a graduation cap, a family picnic, a husband whose smile reached his eyes. The kind of life that made mine feel like an unfinished draft. She sat at the table, folded her hands, and looked at Silas. "You said it would be quick." "It will," Silas said. He set the black folder down as gently as if it were an heirloom. "You are certain of your request?" Her eyes softened, but her voice didn't waver. "I want to make sure my son has enough to finish medical school. I don't have time to save more." The mark in my chest pulsed once. Hot, then icy. I hissed under my breath, pressing my palm against it. Silas flicked me a glance. "Steady." The contract resonates when intent is spoken aloud. "Resonates," I echoed. My pulse thudded like a speaker with bad bass. He ignored me, turning back to Mina. "In exchange, your remaining years will be shortened. Not erased, but lessened." She nodded. "I've lived enough." "He hasn't." The mark flared again, heat flooding my ribs, then retreating to a chill like standing under a draft. I swallowed hard, trying not to let my knees shake. It wasn't pain exactly, more like being plugged into an outlet no one told me about. Silas's voice softened, a tone I hadn't heard from him before. "You understand he will not know where it comes from. He will only know it is enough." "That's all I want," she said simply. Silas turned the folder toward her. The contract glowed faintly, words curling across the page in a language that wasn't English, wasn't Korean, wasn't anything I could pin down, but she seemed to read it. Her eyes followed line by line, her mouth moving silently. Then she picked up the pen. My chest seized, cold rushing through my veins like winter water. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. My vision flickered, and for a second I swore I could see the ink on her page mirrored inside my skin. "Breathe," Silas murmured, not looking away from her. "It will pass." "Define pass," I wheezed. "Not fatal," he said, in the same calm tone you'd use to explain bus routes. Mina signed. The mark in my chest flared once, bright and burning, then cooled into a steady hum. The pen clattered softly onto the wood. Silas closed the folder, and the air in the apartment shifted, lighter, as if some weight had been lifted. Mina sagged a little in her chair, but her smile was real. She touched a photo frame of her son, her hand steady. "Thank you," she whispered. Silas inclined his head, no mockery, no sharpness, just respect. "You have purchased certainty, spend it well." He stood, and so did I, on shaky legs, trying not to show how badly I wanted to lie down on her rug and hibernate. As we reached the door, Mina caught my sleeve. Her hand was cool, papery. "You take care of yourself," she said. I managed a nod. My throat felt too tight for words. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. Neon from a bodega sign painted everything in red and green. I leaned against the brick wall, dragging in air. My chest ached with something I didn't know how to name. "That," I said finally, "wasn't what I expected." Silas adjusted his cuff. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Fire, brimstone, a goat sacrifice. Something cinematic." I shook my head. "Not a mom making sure her kid gets through school." Silas regarded me, expression unreadable in the dim glow. "Not all transactions are cruel. Most are human." I laughed once, sharp. says the guy who crawled out of an espresso machine to tell me my ex used me as a security deposit. He tilted his head. Do you feel worse for her? I opened my mouth to say yes, then hesitated. The truth surprised me. No, I don't know, like she got what she wanted. Like it mattered. The mark pulsed gently, as if in agreement. Silas studied me a moment longer. Then he said, quieter. You will acclimate. The mark is new. It will not always overwhelm you. I glanced at him. That sounded almost caring. It was factual. Sure, I said, but something in his tone had caught at me, like a thread pulling loose. We walked in silence toward the end of the block. My chest still hummed, but it wasn't unbearable anymore. It was almost grounding. And for the first time since this started, a thought whispered through me, stubborn and dangerous. Maybe demons weren't only about destruction. The Bureau's archives didn't have doors. They had thresholds. One moment I was following Silas down another mirrored hallway. The next, I was stepping into a space so vast my brain stalled trying to measure it. Endless shelves stretched in every direction, packed with tomes that flickered faintly like candle flames trapped behind glass. Each book bore a name on the spine, handwritten, etched, embossed. Some glowed faint red, some faint blue, some not at all. It smelled like dust and static. My chest tightened the second we crossed in. The mark pulsed, tugging me forward, like a compass with one destination. Silas noticed. It recognizes relevant entries. Relevant how? I asked. But I already knew. My feet carried me to a shelf without asking for permission. There it was. Julian Cole. Letters branded in a faint, glowing script. Beneath it, smaller, like a footnote, anchored designated, Noah Hahn. The mark in my chest flared white-hot, then dropped into ice. My knees almost gave. I reached out, fingers trembling, but didn't touch the spine. Didn't have to. Just seeing it felt like a betrayal carved into stone. Silas's voice came quiet from behind me. He spoke your name into the contract. I laughed once. Harsh. Too loud in the vastness. Of course he did. Julian always loved using me as collateral. Why stop now? The memory came sharp as glass. Me hunched over a desk in our old office, bleary-eyed from 3 nights without sleep. Julian leaning over my shoulder with that smile he wore like armor. You're brilliant, Noah. Just fix this last bug before the investor call. You're the only one who can. And me, so stupid, thinking that was love. Another memory slammed in, Julian taking my hand outside that same office, whispering, "It's us against the world, okay? Trust me." His lips on my temple. His other hand already on his phone, answering someone else. I clenched my fists until my nails bit skin. The mark burned in rhythm, like it wanted to shout too. Silas stepped closer, not crowding, but enough that I felt his presence. I could have chosen another, he said. The designation grants me the right, not the obligation. There were other candidates. My head snapped up. And you still picked me? His expression didn't shift much, but his eyes did, darker, sharper. You are stable. Unusually so. Most anchors fragment under the pressure of resonance. You did not. Great, I spat. So I'm what? Durable goods? High-quality product? Congrats to me. Noah. My name in his mouth landed different than Julian's ever had. Measured, heavy. I did not say it was only durability. Then what? I demanded. The echoes swallowed my voice and threw it back at me. Because from where I'm standing, all I see is Julian, once again, writing me into something I didn't choose. And you confirming it? Silas's jaw tightened. For a flicker, I thought I saw something like regret cross his face. I chose you, he said slowly, because you would not break. And because you would tell me if you did. That stunned me into silence. Julian had always wanted me pliant, adaptable, easy to bend into his next pitch deck. Silas was saying the opposite. That my refusal mattered. That my resistance was part of why I was here. It should have felt like flattery. Instead, it twisted. Because being chosen didn't erase the fact that Julian had set me up in the first place. didn't erase the years of smiling while hollowing me out. My chest pulsed, caught between heat and chill, like the mark itself couldn't decide which side to land on. I turned away from the shelf, heart hammering, throat raw. "I hate both of you for this," I said, and the words came out truer than I wanted. Silas didn't flinch. Hatred is permitted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I walked out of the aisle, each step echoing too loud in the infinite space, carrying my anger and that ugly, unwelcome whisper underneath it. Being chosen still mattered. The signing chamber looked like a boardroom designed by a surrealist. A long table of black glass reflected the ceiling, which was nothing but sky. A storm trapped in architecture. Lightning flared silently above us, throwing reflections across the mirrored walls. At the far end of the table sat a man in his 50s, sleek suit, cufflinks shaped like miniature skyscrapers. He had the smug weight of someone who believed the world was a stock he already owned. Silas introduced him in that same calm recital tone. "Mr. Roth, principal signatory. Terms: accelerated acquisition, guaranteed monopoly position, 10 years. Price?" Roth asked, impatient. "Your foresight," Silas said smoothly. "The instinct that has guided your decisions until now." Roth barely hesitated. "I can live without instinct. My team will cover it." He leaned over the glass, ready to sign. The mark in my chest flared before the pen even touched paper, heat so sharp it cut. I grabbed the edge of my chair, swallowing bile. "Silas," I hissed. "Hold steady," he murmured without turning his head. The contract script began to unfurl across the surface. Lines of light spiraled upward, binding Roth's name into the storm above. The energy hit like a wave, hot, then freezing, then hot again, rolling straight through the mark carved under my skin. It wasn't just pain. It was too much information, too many currents trying to pass through me. My ribs felt like glass under pressure, vibrating until they would shatter. My lungs refused to remember how to breathe. "I can't." The words scraped out, half-gasp. The storm cracked. The mirrored walls pulsed with light, showing not one Roth but dozens, all signing at once. The overload slammed into me, folding my spine forward. Spots burst across my vision. Somewhere far away, I heard Silas say, "Sharper now, Noah." And before I knew what I was doing, my hand shot out. My fingers clamped around his wrist. The effect was instant. Heat surged, but this time it spread evenly, redirected, like a circuit completed. His skin under mine was impossibly steady, and as the mark blazed I felt his pulse, calm, anchored, pulling me back into rhythm. My chest loosened. Air rushed in. My heart sank to something outside myself. For a terrifying, extraordinary second, it felt like we were one body breathing. Silas's head turned, fractionally, eyes cutting to me. His expression didn't change, but his pulse under my palm jumped once, betraying him. The storm above steadied. The signatures locked into place. Roth exhaled, smug as ever, and the pen clattered onto the glass. He didn't notice what had almost gone wrong, but I did. My entire body knew. Slowly, carefully, Silas slipped his hand free. The contract folded into nothing, vanishing like smoke. The client straightened his tie, muttered something about a board call, and strode out through the mirrored exit, his reflection multiplying until it disappeared. The silence that followed was deafening. I slumped back in the chair, still trembling. What the hell? Was that supposed to happen? "No," Silas admitted. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. The resonance spiked. It nearly breached containment. "Containment," I echoed, half hysterical. "You mean me?" His gaze flicked to my chest. "The mark routed more than you could bear alone. You improvised. I grabbed you like a drowning idiot grabs a lifeline." "Efficient," he said. Then, softer, effective. My laugh cracked. "Weak." "You're welcome." For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed his face. He looked away, straightened his jacket. "You need rest." "I need a drink," I muttered. "Or 6. He didn't answer, just gestured me toward the exit. We ended up back in a smaller chamber, quieter, walls matte instead of mirrored. Silas moved with crisp efficiency, but when he set a porcelain teacup in front of me, steam curling from it, the gesture startled me more than the storm had. I blinked at it. "You serve tea now?" "I prepared it before we left," he said. "Chamomile. To stabilize." "Chamomile," I repeated. "You're telling me Hell's contract enforcer carries herbal tea in his jacket?" He inclined his head, perfectly straight-faced. "Efficiency." Despite myself, I laughed. And winced, because even laughing tugged at the mark. "You're unbelievable." "I am consistent," he corrected. Then, after a pause, "You frightened me." That silenced me more than anything else. I stared at him over the rising steam. His posture was impeccable, every line controlled, but his eyes, they weren't. I looked down at the tea, fingers brushing the warm ceramic. My hand still remembered the steadiness of his pulse, the way it had synced with mine. "You're supposed to be the terrifying one," I said finally. He folded his hands together. "Terrifying things can still worry." I didn't have a comeback for that. I sipped the tea instead. It was bland, floral, grounding. The mark in my chest pulsed gently, no longer clawing at me. Just humming. And though every instinct screamed that I should be furious, afraid, running, I sat there drinking Silas's tea in a silent chamber, thinking about the feel of his wrist under my palm, and wondering when exactly everything had shifted. Miss Peregrine's office was the only room in the bureau that felt like it belonged on Earth. Shelves stacked neatly with binders, a desk lamp casting warm yellow light, a fern that might even have been real. She read over the latest report with lips pressed thin. "Spikes in resonance," she said, eyes flicking toward me, "are predictable in theory but volatile in practice." I sat stiffly, resisting the urge to rub at the mark glowing faintly under my shirt. Good to know I'm volatile in practice. Always suspected. Silas stood near the shelves, immaculate as ever, but I noticed a tiny wrinkle in his cuff. That was how shaken he'd been by the last signing. One wrinkle. Peregrine set the folder aside and folded her hands. "Mr. Hahn, you should know. Provisional agreements can be rewritten. If a clause is restructured with equivalent exchange, loopholes open. With enough precision, a contract can be turned inside out." I straightened. "Wait. Are you saying there's a way to undo this?" "Not undo," she corrected, almost sharply. "Reconfigure. Nothing disappears. Energy moves. Always at a cost." I glanced at Silas. He met my eyes, unreadable. "She is correct." Peregrine pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "Be cautious what you ask for, Anchor. Precision is survival. Ambiguity kills faster than fire." The mark in my chest throbbed at her words, like it agreed. I managed a weak smile. Yeah. Ambiguity already killed my last relationship. For the first time, I thought I saw her mouth twitch in something close to amusement. "Then you may adapt better than most." She dismissed us with a nod. Silas led me out into the mirrored hall, silent until we stepped through a threshold that spat us back onto a New York street. It was past midnight, the city humming with its usual insomnia, traffic, neon signs, the smell of hot pretzels and exhaust. The ordinary world. For a second, I could almost pretend I wasn't tethered to a demon. We walked side by side, silence stretching until I broke it. "So, how many times have you done this?" Silas's gaze stayed forward. "Contracts? Thousands. No, I mean anchors. People. Me, but before me." He hesitated. That alone felt monumental. "Enough," he said finally. "Too many. Few remain long." Something in his tone was different, lower, worn. I stopped on the corner, studying him in the glow of a bodega sign. For the first time, the edges of his perfection looked like armor instead of nature. "You sound tired," I said. He looked at me then, expression carefully still. "Eternity is repetition. Clauses repeat, requests repeat. Greed and fear do not change." A pause. "Even demons tire of patterns." I didn't know what to say to that. I shoved my hands into my hoodie pocket, suddenly uncomfortable with how human he sounded. Silas, apparently deciding the topic had run its course, tilted his head toward a nearby cart. You require food. I blinked. You're suggesting street hot dogs? They are efficient, he said. Efficiently fatal, I muttered, but my stomach growled anyway. We bought 2. I bit into mine immediately, grease and mustard exploding down my hand. Heaven. Silas, however, regarded his like it was an unsolvable riddle. He lifted it gingerly, examined the bun, then tried to bite without disturbing the toppings. The mustard immediately smeared across his perfectly pressed sleeve. I snorted so hard I almost choked. Oh my God, you've never eaten one, have you? His mouth tightened. I have consumed sustenance in multiple forms. Yeah, spreadsheets don't count, I said, wiping my hand. Here, tilt it down. No, not like that. You're holding it like a fountain pen. He followed my directions with the dignity of someone performing surgery, then took the most precise bite in hot dog history. He chewed, swallowed, and gave a grave nod. Acceptable. I doubled over laughing. That's the highest praise you've ever given anything. His eyes slid toward me, faintly narrowed, but his sleeve still bore a smear of mustard. The demon who scared clients into signing their lives away had lost his street food. Something in my chest loosened. For once, the mark pulsed, not in pain but in warmth, as if it too found this ridiculous. We kept walking, eating in silence. The city moved around us, oblivious, and in the space between bites, I realized the tension that had wrapped around me since his first appearance had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't only fear anymore. It was something heavier, something more dangerous. Trust. Julian's new office looked like it had been designed to scream winner. Glass walls, brushed steel, a panoramic view of Manhattan glittering behind him like he'd arranged the skyline personally. His team, 6 bright-eyed 20-somethings, sat in rows with laptops, nodding along as Julian prowled in front of a massive screen. The slide on display read, Total Dominance, Market Capture 2025. Silas stood beside me near the back, silent as a shadow. I tugged my hoodie tighter, ignoring the way the mark in my chest pulsed harder every time Julian spoke. And that's why our projections triple in third quarter, Julian was saying, his grin wide enough to blind. Because while other companies chase small wins, we've guaranteed big ones. Guaranteed. He clicked to the next slide, a sleek diagram, all arrows pointing upward. The mark burned cold. My stomach turned. I whispered, He's doing it again. Silas's jaw tightened. He is leveraging the clause, redirecting cost. Onto them? I glanced at the young employees, their faces shining with desperate belief. Silas didn't answer. He didn't have to. The presentation ended in applause. Julian basked in it, arms spread like he was the messiah of disruptive innovation. Then his eyes flicked to me, sharp and bright, and for a second it was just, like before, how he'd always find me in a room, reel me in with that smile. He dismissed his team, and they filed out, chattering, leaving us alone with the skyline. Julian walked over, that grin softening into something more intimate. Noah. His voice dropped into the register he'd always used when he wanted me pliant. You look good. Different. Stronger. I folded my arms. Cut the warm-up, Julian. What the hell are you doing? He gestured at the empty chairs. What I always do. Protecting the vision. Making sure everyone's taken care of. You, especially. The mark throbbed. I ground my teeth. Don't you dare say this is for me. His smile faltered, then returned, brittle at the edges. You don't get it. I had to name you in the contract. It was the only way to keep you safe. If I hadn't, someone else would have been dragged in and destroyed. At least this way, I knew you'd survive. It was the same pitch he'd used 100 times before. I'm hurting you to protect you. And God help me. A part of me still wanted to believe him. But another part, older now, raw and scarred, snapped awake. Safe? My laugh was sharp, ugly. You call this safe? My chest lights up like a bad rave every time you want another win. You didn't protect me, Julian. You used me. Again. His smile cracked. I did this because I love. No, I cut in, louder than I meant. My voice echoed off the glass. Don't you dare. Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't write my name into your contracts without asking. Silas shifted slightly beside me, silent witness, his presence radiating tension. Julian's charm drained away, leaving irritation. You've always been ungrateful. I built everything for us and you built it on me, I said, voice shaking with fury. On my work, my time, my body, my name, and you never asked if I wanted any of it. Silas finally spoke, calm but edged. The truth is clear. The clause will consume those who follow him. They cannot consent, and yet he will trade them anyway. Julian snapped toward him. And you let Noah stand here tethered, burning, while you hide behind your rules? You're no better. My chest tightened at the words. My eyes flew to Silas. Is that true? Did you know he was pushing the cost onto his team and just, decided not to tell me? Silas's silence was answer enough. His face stayed composed, but I saw the truth in the stillness of it. Anger surged hotter than the Mark ever had. God. You both. My laugh came out raw. Julian manipulates me, and you just keep me in the dark because it's easier. Silas's eyes flicked toward me, almost pained. I was protecting you from unnecessary weight. That's the same line he used, I shouted. My voice broke, and I hated how it sounded. You don't get to decide what I can or can't carry. You don't get to protect me by lying. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the city beyond the glass. The Mark pulsed wildly, torn between heat and chill, like it couldn't pick a side. I shook my head, heart pounding. I'm done. With both of you. Julian reached out, but I stepped back. Silas did nothing, which somehow hurt worse. And for the first time since this started, I realized I could just leave. No one could stop me if I chose not to stay. So I turned, walked to the door, and didn't look back. The Mark flared once, searing, but this time, I didn't flinch. Because for the first time in years, the word tasted right on my tongue. The bureau's threshold took me back in without protest. No Mark pulling me forward, no surge of heat forcing my hand. Just me deciding to step through the mirrored surface, and the glass opening like a curtain. For the first time since this began, the Mark stayed quiet. Not gone, never gone, but silent, waiting. The halls were as endless as ever, but I knew where I was going now. Past the clerks whose pens wrote light into the air, past the shelves that hummed with contracts. I found Silas in a side chamber, bent over a desk of black glass. The stormlight from a previous deal flickered faintly around his shoulders. He looked up as I entered. Surprise flickered across his usually unreadable face. Noah, I'm back, I said simply. The Mark didn't force you? His gaze lowered to my chest. No. I pressed my palm there. The skin was cool, steady. I came because I wanted to. That seemed to unsettle him more than any spike of power. Why? I stepped closer, the words spilling before I could second-guess them. Because I'm done letting Julian write my story. If contracts are about precision, then I want mine rewritten. We can change the terms, right? Peregrine said as much. Equivalent exchange. Something sharp lit his eyes. Interest. Maybe even admiration. Humans rarely understand that nuance. Well, I said, pulling a chair forward. I've had practice living as someone else's fine print. His lips twitched, almost a smile. He gestured for me to sit. Explain. I leaned on the glass table, ideas snapping into place like puzzle pieces. Julian redirected the cost of his deal onto his team. They never consented. That should be a breach, but instead of voiding the whole contract and letting him slip away, we reconfigure. We calculate a true equivalent exchange, redirect the price where it belongs. On to Julian, Silas murmured. Exactly. He pays in full. Not his interns, not me. I hesitated, then added, and if necessary, I'll carry a share. But by choice, as a CO signer, not a victim. For a long moment Silas just stared at me. His stillness made the room feel like a photograph. Then he said, very quietly, You are proposing to outlawyer a demon. I spread my hands. Well, I've had the best crash course. 7 days with you. His laugh, short, almost soundless, escaped before he seemed to realize it. The glass table trembled faintly, like the bureau itself approved. Unprecedented, he said. But possible. We leaned over the table together. Silas drew symbols across the surface with his fingertip, lines of light unfurling into clauses. I countered with notes, questions, challenges. For every point he raised, I argued another angle, pulling from years of contracts I'd once thought were mundane. Leases, NDAs, the endless paperwork Julian had shoved onto me. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was building. Hours, or maybe minutes, time bent strangely here. Passed with us, bent side by side over the glowing surface. At some point his shoulder brushed mine, and instead of flinching, I stayed. The contact steadied the rhythm of my chest. You surprise me, he said finally. Is that rare? Rare enough that I remember it. He angled his head toward me. You return not as obligation, but as partner. The word made my throat tighten. Partner, not collateral, not anchor, not tool. I forced a grin. Don't get sentimental on me, Silas. You'll ruin your terrifying brand. He gave me the faintest glare, but it didn't hold. His eyes softened instead. Terrifying things can still choose partnership. I looked down at the glowing draft between us, words and symbols looping together into something new. For the first time since this began, I felt like I wasn't just trapped in someone else's contract. I was writing one of my own. And this time, every clause would be mine. The mirror hall felt like a funhouse built for litigators. A long expanse of black glass. Walls that returned your face in infinite variations. A ceiling that reflected a sky I didn't recognize. Stormlight frozen mid-thunder. The air tasted like the moment before a signature. Metallic, decisive. Silas stood at my side, a dark line of calm. Between us on the obsidian table, our draft glowed. Symbols and clauses nested like clockwork. I'd written part of it myself, my handwriting a human vein through demonic script. It steadied me to see it. Proof I wasn't just an object on the page. The door rippled and admitted Julian. He came in smiling like he'd already won. You've made this theatrical, he said, spreading his arms to take in the walls, the storm, me. Always did have a flair for drama, Noah. My chest tightened. The mark under my shirt warmed in a slow warning pulse. I kept my voice dry. Some of us learned it from the best. Julian's gaze skipped to Silas and back to me. Look, I understand the optics, I do. But we can clean this up. People will benefit, the company will grow, and the costs are distributed. No one really suffers. The mark flared hot, then went cold, as if dunked in ice. I tamped down a flinch. Silas's eyes cut toward me. Saw, measured, filed it where he kept everything important. Your statement is false, Silas said, smooth as a blade. Your employees cannot consent to carry your price. Redirecting cost violates the spirit and the letter of the clause. Julian scoffed. Please. Everyone shares the load. That's leadership. That's... The mark flashed hard enough that I saw the shape under my skin, the tiny keyhole blazing through fabric. My breath hitched. He's lying, I said, voice rough. It knows it. Julian's smile thinned. Or, maybe your new tattoo is malfunctioning. Enough, Silas said. And the glass under his palm lit from within. Mr. Cole, you will hear the terms of reconfiguration. Julian's eyes narrowed, but curiosity tugged at his mouth. He always did love a pitch when he thought he could steal it. Silas gestured, and our draft bloomed into the air, lines of light forming a lattice of language. We will not void your contract, he said. We will rebalance it. Equivalent exchange. Rebalance? Julian repeated, wary. Your current price has been unlawfully distributed, Silas continued. We calculate the true cost, and return it to its source. He lifted his chin. You. Julian laughed, short and disbelieving. And what does that mean, precisely? My bank account? My car? Take it, I'll buy another. It means your gift, I said before Silas could. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. "The thing you've used like a crowbar since college. You sell other people's ideas like they were yours, because you can spot a spark before it catches. You call it vision. It's theft." The contract made it easier, greased the slide. "So here's the exchange." The hall seemed to lean closer. Even the storm held its breath. "You keep your company," I said. "You keep your name. You even keep your chance. But the borrowed fire goes out. From this moment, if an idea isn't wholly yours, if it belongs to an intern, or a partner or a stranger on the subway, you won't be able to hold it. It will slip through you like water. And when you try to use it, it will crumble in public. You will be compelled to credit the source or fall silent." A flush rose in Julian's cheeks. "You can't equal to." "We can," Silas said, and a subtle pride colored the words. "The price is proportional and precise." Julian turned to him, desperate now. "What about him?" He jabbed a finger at me. "He's your anchor. He bleeds when you pull. Don't pretend this is righteous. You're just moving suffering around like a spreadsheet." I didn't look at Silas. I looked at my own handwriting in the floating text. At the small line I'd added under enforcement conditions. "I'm not your anchor," I said softly. "Not for this. I'm your CO author." Julian blinked. "What?" Silas angled the lattice so the clause I'd written hovered between us. He didn't read it. He didn't need to. I did. Signature, voluntary. I recited, the keyhole under my ribs warming. Not in pain, but in recognition. I carry a fractional share of the load to keep the pathways from burning out. Not because you named me. Because I choose to write my name here. Silas's attention flicked to me. It was not the look of a principal inspecting a tool. It was something quieter. It felt like the pause you take when someone says "I'm here" and means it. Julian's laugh wobbled. "You're insane. Both of you. Noah, you don't even like him. 5 minutes ago you were shouting at him." "Both things can be true," I said. "I can be furious and still refuse to let you harm people who didn't sign up for this." He opened his mouth, reaching for an old weapon. "I did this for you." But the mark caught the shape of the lie before he did. It blazed, and the warning burned straight through my sternum like a bell made of heat. He stopped, startled by something even he couldn't talk over. Silas spread his fingers in the air. "State your acceptance, Mr. Cole." Julian's eyes darted to the walls, to the ceiling that made sky of storm, to me. For the first time since I met him, he looked small in a room. "No," he said. "No, I won't." The glass around us rippled, not a threat, an answer. The Bureau didn't need his permission to remove a theft it had never granted, but it wanted his words on the record. Precision is survival. I stepped in, not closer but truer. "Julian," I said, and his name in my mouth sounded like a door closing. "You won't die. You'll just have to be exactly as good as you are." He flinched. The worst price for a man like him. He swallowed. "Fine," he said, hoarse. "Fine. I accept." The storm moved. The ceiling unfroze and rolled without sound. The lattice folded down into the contract like a flower going to seed. A subtle wind went through the mirror hall, a release, and the mark in my chest cooled to a steady ember. I felt it happen. Not pain. Absence. A pressure I didn't know I'd been carrying since the night Silas stepped out of the espresso machine lifted, lightening my lungs. Somewhere far beyond the hall, a dozen small weights thudded off other people's chests. Interns. Assistants. A junior dev with a headache that would not end. Relief arriving like rain. Julian staggered, as if a step had vanished under his foot. His eyes went distant, as if he were reaching for a shelf and finding only air. "What did you do?" he whispered. "Gave you a fair fight," I said. Silas sealed the draft with a press of his palm. The ink flashed and sank. "The contract is closed," he said. "The reconfiguration is complete. The unlawfully burdened are released." For a long moment we stood in our own breathing. My heart found an ordinary rhythm. Across from me, Julian looked at his hands like he was seeing them, for the first time without someone else's outline traced over them. He tried to muster a smile. It failed. He lifted his chin, pride dying hard. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But I won't regret not being your excuse." He turned and walked out. The mirrors took him in and multiplied him until he was nothing. Silas and I stayed. The hall dimmed from stormlight to something like late afternoon. He looked at me, really looked, and the edges of his perfection softened. "You carried a share," he said. "I did," I answered. "Small. By choice." He nodded. "It made the path clean." I exhaled. The word that rose surprised me by how right it felt. Good. We didn't touch. We didn't need to. The keyhole under my ribs sat quiet as a kept promise. For the first time since this started, I believed rescue didn't have to look like a miracle. It could look like a sentence written exactly right. Outside the hall, a dozen lives were free of a debt they never owed. Inside it, a demon and a man stood over a finished page, and didn't flinch from what they'd made together. "Tea?" Silas asked, after a beat, as if reconfiguration required chamomile. I huffed a laugh. "Yeah," I said. "Let's write a clause about that. Mandatory hot beverages after life-altering paperwork." "Draft it," he said, and the corner of his mouth tipped, just enough to count. We left the mirrors behind, the contract closed, and the balance finally, blessedly, true. The café overlooked the East River, its windows fogged faintly from the cold outside. Ferry horns carried across the water, blending with the hiss of the espresso machine. For once, the smell of coffee didn't mean danger or a demon crawling out of steel. Just beans, milk, and the faint sugar crust of pastries. Silas sat opposite me, impossibly out of place in his immaculate suit. The contract had ended at dawn, the mark on my chest cooling to a faint scar no one else could see. I'd half expected him to vanish with it. Instead, here he was, staring at a ceramic mug as though it might detonate. "You just pick it up," I said, fighting a grin. "Like a cup, not a weapon." "I am aware of the mechanics," he replied stiffly. He lifted the mug by its handle, fingers precise as if holding evidence in court. Steam curled past his face. "Good. Step 1 accomplished. Now, drinking." He tilted it too far, too fast. Coffee sloshed over the rim and ran down the side, pooling on the saucer. He froze, expression blank. I lost it, laughter bursting out. "Okay, points for effort, but you just waterboarded yourself with a latte." His mouth pressed into a thin line. He set the cup down carefully, examining the trail of liquid on the saucer. "This vessel is flawed." "Uh-huh." I slid a napkin across to him. "Sure. Blame the cup. Not the demon who's been drinking tea like it's a ritual sacrifice." To his credit, he actually used the napkin. Wiped the saucer, his hand, even the handle before trying again. This time slower, deliberate. He managed a sip without incident. "See?" I said. "No melting, no casualties. You're officially a functioning member of café society." He lowered the mug, considering. "It is bitter. That's the point. People purchase bitterness willingly." "Some of us," I said, leaning back in my chair, "find comfort in it." His eyes flicked to me. "Ah." For a moment, the air shifted, lighter, not empty. I broke it with a smirk. "Don't worry. If you leave it unfinished, I won't penalize you. No fines for undrunk lattes." His brow arched. "Fines?" "Yeah," I said. "You know, like, Clause 4, subsection B. Failure to consume at least 70% of a cappuccino results in forfeiture of pastry rights." He studied me, then said with absolute seriousness, "A clause with such penalties would be unenforceable." I laughed so hard the barista gave me a look. "God, you're impossible." We sat in companionable quiet for a while, sipping. I could almost imagine we were just two people after a long week. No contracts, no marks, no stormlit halls. Just caffeine and the river outside. Finally, Silas set his mug down, hands folded. "Your obligation has ended. You are free." The words landed like they should have been heavy. They weren't. They felt obvious. "I know," I said softly. "And I'm still here." His gaze sharpened, something unguarded flickering there. "By choice." "By choice," I echoed. He nodded once, as if logging it into some eternal ledger. Then what remains between us is not obligation. It must be defined differently. Like friendship? I teased. Or maybe a wildly inappropriate workplace romance. The faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. We do not share a workplace. Technicalities, I said. My chest warmed. Not the Mark this time. Just me. Point is, whatever this is, it doesn't need a contract. Not anymore. Silas looked at the cooling coffee as if memorizing the concept of something simple and human. Then he inclined his head, conceding. Agreed. We sat a little longer, the silence filled not with tension but with the clatter of dishes, the chatter of strangers. Outside the river kept moving, carrying lights across its black surface. I finished my latte, set it down with a final clink, and said the thing I'd been holding like a secret clause all morning. If we ever do make another contract, I told him, smiling, it'll only have funny penalties. Like fines for undrunk coffee. The corner of his mouth curved, just enough. And that was it. The end of obligations, the beginning of something neither of us needed to name to know it mattered. If we ever make another contract, it will only have silly fines for unfinished lattes.